She Has No Name, an audiobook written and narrated by Michelle Blackerby. In a cottage on a solitary planet with a solitary moon circling a solitary sun lived a solitary woman. Well, mostly solitary. She had critters in abundance. The planet held dense, lush vegetation. The trees, they were her friends. She spent many a day exploring the many vistas and many a night sleeping under the stars. She never worried, for there was no survival of the fittest here. The trees provided freely life-sustaining fruits all year round. Water flowed in abundance from the mountaintops, fresh and clear. The animals lived long, natural lives. They did not have to devour each other for sustenance. They did not have to compete for food. The trees provided. Overpopulation was non-existent. The planet was in balance. From the death of one entity rose the life of another. Never more, never less. It had been so for millennia. Disease did not exist. It was unnecessary, and so nature had not created it. The woman was quite old. One would never know, other than her stark white hair. It was long and uncut, and most of the time in a single braid down her back. She was energetic and sprightly, having spent most of her life in the clear air with clean water and untainted, nutritious food. Her life held no stress to deteriorate her mind, body, or soul. She was whole, at peace. She had lost track of her years many a cycle ago, and it did not matter. Who cares how many years had passed? She certainly didn't. There was no reason to care. Her only care was what wonderful place there was to see tomorrow. What wonderful thing could she create today? And create she did. Many magnificent pieces. Shelves and tables, chairs and sofas, archways and sculptures. Everywhere she explored, she left a handmade object behind. Her favorite was moon gates, large ones as tall as trees, and small ones the size of fairies, and every size in between, made of whatever materials were available, vines, branches, rocks, and sometimes clay. Sometimes they marked an amazing trail. Some encircled the entrances to caves that she'd either camped in or explored. One marked the crash site of the spaceship she'd arrived on. Phoenix 7 was a passenger ship. She'd been far too young to understand what had brought it down, but she'd visited the site frequently over the years. The moon gate had been built piece by piece from its wreckage. The spiky gate became a monument to the memories of those she'd known on the ship. At first, she had been lonely. Her heart still ached for the loss of her loved ones. Now, she never finds herself lonely. Not for as long as she can remember. She wasn't really alone, after all, for many creatures had made her their friend. Always one or two accompanied her on her explorations. She met new ones wherever she went on the planet. None yet had ever treated her with hostility or guile. Mind, she hadn't really been across the whole of the planet. How many lifetimes would that take? She's sure she's lived much longer here than any of her species counterparts out in the universe. It could not have been more than a couple of ordinary lifespans, could it have? She remembers vaguely the death of an elderly gentleman on the ship. She had been so small then, it had been confusing. Her mother and father had taken great time and effort attempting to explain the process of death. She hadn't really understood until decades later when the old orange cat had died in her arms. At least, what she'd labeled as a cat. As it lay dying, its frail body shutting down, all the words of her parents flooded back in her mind like water. She had wept, uncontrollably and unending. Great gut-wrenching sobs for the loss of her cat, a decades-long friend, and the loss of all the loved ones she'd had aboard the ship. Frail, the old man on the ship had been withered, loose skin covering bone. She could see every bone, she remembered. His hair was wispy and dull. If that is what one looks like when old, well, she was nowhere near old just yet. She wonders if she'll live long enough to run out of new places to see on the planet. Would she someday get tired and bored of it? The new orange cat, lovingly called Fluffball, hops up on her lap as she ponders. Fluffball had wandered out of the woods shortly after her predecessor, Orange Cat, had passed on. From where she had come, or how she had come to exist, the woman did not know. The planet replacing its own, she supposed. So much of the planet she had yet to discover. So much of its mystery she knows she will never understand. But she doesn't mind. Her mama used to say a girl's got to keep some of her mysteries to herself. So, she'll let the planet keep its secrets. Well, some. And maybe it's time to unearth a new secret from this big old rock that she's made her home. So many that it keeps from her. But which secret? Boundless caves are scattered with endless exploration possibilities. That forest that's so thick and dense that you can hardly pass between the trees. Strange noises of all sorts echo from deep within its recesses, especially in the dark of night. Or perhaps the endless sea that is green. It extends as far to the east and as far to the west as she could ever reach. Could she build a boat and sail out into it? She's not quite ready to build something so large, though. And she wants to go sooner rather than later. A seaworthy boat would take so much time to build. Perhaps a smaller vessel, lake-sized. She could explore the mountain in the lake. Lake Moat Mountain. It's called that, for the expanse of mountains is in the center of a great lake and appears as a castle of old surrounded by a great moat. It wouldn't have to be a large vessel to cross to the mountains. Her river canoe might make it across, if it's still enough day by the time she gets there with the canoe. However, the idea of hauling it the distance from her river to the moat doesn't sound fun, and it would never make it if the wind was strong. No, she'd have to build a new vessel. It would have to be longer and wider. She should be able to find all the materials she needs there. All she would need is a day or two to build it. She could camp out on the shore while she works. Yes, she decides. That is what she'll do. "We're going exploring," she declares loudly to all the animals surrounding her. Loud enough that any in the nearby woods can hear her. She had had a creature that she dubbed as Squirrel quite angry with her once for leaving without informing it. It chittered at her angrily for hours when she had returned from a 2-week explore. The morning was misty as she donned her pack and set off into the woods. Many animals fluttered off to their own woodland adventures, but about 20 stayed with her till the outer edge of the woods. By the time she was across the grasslands and following the grown-over trail to Moat Lake, she had 5 companions remaining. Fluffball, of course. He rode on her shoulder, rocking and swaying with the motions of her steps. A large bird-like creature flits from tree to tree above her head. Its brightly colored and ever-changing feathers stand out starkly against the trees. It flies ahead and lands on a branch,
then becomes impatient with her slow progress, and flies over her head, landing in a low branch behind her. It calls out a short song to her. Taking again to the sky, it glides in circles high above the trees. She only occasionally catches glimpses of it through the branches in the trees overhead. Before long, it is once again in a branch ahead of her. She speaks to it occasionally on the trail, but mostly just lets it be. It's not exactly a native to the planet. Several parrots had survived the crash. They had made their home in the southern forest. Their population still thrives there. After about 50 years of being on the planet, however, the birds had succumbed to the natural ways of the planet. They had morphed into something different and yet somehow the same. At first, they had mated and reared their young as they always had. Their colors had remained the same as before. But gradually, as the old died, they were replaced by young who mysteriously exited the forest. Their colors were the same and yet ever-changing, as if bleeding and flowing about the top of a pool of water. The bird, tilting its head side to side, begins a quiet chitter. It hops into the air and glides into the trees to her right. She listens to its chittering, now a bit louder. It stopped in one place. Must be trying to draw her attention to something. Catching up to the last spot, she saw it. She pushes her way through the bushes and twigs, steps over logs. She finds the bird, now quiet, perched on a fallen pile of branches and trees in a smallish clearing. 2 trees lay on their side, roots pulled from the ground and rotting. Tweet, 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 calls the bird. Yes, yes, she mumbles. Pulling out a small axe from her pack, she hunts through the pile. A long, sturdy branch, slightly taller than herself, catches her eye. It does not appear to have begun rotting yet, and has an interesting shape to it. Using the axe, she chops off its side branches. Then, she whacks off the skinny end to make a blunt edge. The bird knows her well. It is an adventure-worthy walking stick, though far too bulky to use that way just now. A couple of nights whittling beside a campfire will have it in tip-top shape, usable. Taking a rope from her pack, she straps the walking stick across her back. It is with greater difficulty that she makes her way back to the trail. The stick is bulky and keeps snagging on foliage. Tumbling out from the brush, she finds her animal crew sitting waiting for her. A pile of fruit rests on the ground in the middle of them. The bear creature, not quite a real bear, but not quite not a bear, cat perched on its shoulder, holds a paw out to her with the ripe fruit. Oof! Eat, in other words. The woman takes the fruit and grabs a couple more. Locating a decent enough sitting rock, she rests and she eats. There are very little sounds as she enjoys this mid-morning meal. Wind through the branches, tiny snaps of twigs off deep into the woods, light huffs and snorts from her friends. The bird is silent. Its work is done for the day, she figures. Having eaten its fill, the bird flaps itself quietly over to Wolf and lights on its back. Wolf merely glances back, its tongue wagging, and returns to its own large pile of fruit. The wolf is large and fat, with long fur around its neck that reaches to its stomach. On 4 paws, it stands nearly as tall as the bear. Standing on its hind legs, as it often did, it could reach high into the branches of any tree. Its paws were not quite paws, and yet not quite hands. Somehow they were both, and yet also neither. Retractable claws snap in and out at its whim. The bear, with its odd jutting clumps of fur, plops back onto its haunches. bear and wolf growl and yap back and forth between bites. The woman is unsure whether or not they are arguing or simply carrying on mealtime conversation. The exchange continues as she leaves them to it in order to gather up food for the walk. By the time she has collected enough to satisfy her, the conversation has stopped. The creatures mull about, fur-laden ones cleaning their paws and faces with their tongues. She turns and continues down the trail. A quiet settles over the crew, as if each member is lost in its own thoughts. The hush of the trees is like a blanket over the skin. As the gray of early evening creeps in, the adventurers arrive at a way station camp. She's used it many a times in her explores. The ground here is well worn. A warming pit and a cooking shelf stand picturesquely in the center. The woman unloads her pack. Unbuckling a shovel made of titanium scraps of the spaceship's hull, she digs for warming stones. The warming stones are unnecessary, as it is never truly cold, but they've always brought her comfort. It was difficult to sleep at first after the crash. She was lonely and heartbroken, and young, she thinks, looking back. The day after the crash, Wolf had found her. She had been sitting among the wreckage, curled nearly in a ball, crying. She doesn't even know how long she had been there that way. Wolf had sniffed her, chortled, put his snout under her hand and nudged her. At first sight of him, she had been terrified, but she had let him approach without recoiling. She'd been exhausted, hungry, uncaring about her own survival. When the concerned animal could not get a response from her, he had begun digging a pit near her. Clawing rocks had been flying out from the debris. Wolf had called into the forest. Then it had begun carefully picking up the rocks with its claws. Piling them high in front of her, he nudged at her. She had watched with lethargic curiosity. By the time Wolf had finished stacking the rocks, a stack of fruits had been piled up beside it. Birds had flown in from the nearby trees. One by one they had dropped fruit from their claws. The woman had watched in fascination, still unmoving. She could feel the warmth from the stones. Their glow faded in and out, like the glow of embers in a fire. The scent of the fruit, being roasted by the heat of the stone pyre, had drawn her out. She'd been hungry. Wolf helped her now as she dug up stones for their evening's stay. As the stones appeared, Lizard runs up and carries them to the end of the fire pit. She had not realized Lizard had been following along with them, yet here it was. Its hands were thickly calloused, so it could handle the stones without flinching. Lizard was part chameleon, part turtle. It had a shell which changed colors to camouflage to its environment. It could curl up into its shell and not be seen. When not curled into its shell, it stood upright. It was as tall as the woman's knee, with leathery skin the color of a pine cone. It made an odd clicking sound with its tongue to communicate. The woman had learned a few words in its clicking language. It sometimes understood her, but not having the same physical anatomy in her throat, it had difficulty following her poor speech. It sat now, feet splayed out, and warming by the glow of the stone pit, its shell propped against a rock. It munched contentedly on a roasted red fruit. The woman sat next to it, crisscross applesauce, and plucked a juicy-looking orange fruit from the roasting mound of produce. It chitters. She snaps with her tongue. The bear lumbers out of the forest. Twigs snap and break as it pushes between trees. It plops down near the warming pit with something between a sigh, a growl, and a yawn. It is soon curled into a ball, snoring softly. The bird lights gently on its shoulder. It tucks its head beneath its wings and sleeps. Before long, Cat is resting on Bear's hind end, a tiny ball of orange fur in a sea of thick black fur. Wolf, having circled the camp's perimeters, as is its long-standing tradition, curls up on the ground with its back against Bear. Lizard soon joins the sleepers, tucking its body into its shell at one end of the group and disappearing from sight. The woman leans back against the rock. She takes slow, deep breaths. Crickets chirp softly. A light breeze dances across her skin and through her hair. It smells of damp earth. After enjoying her fill of peace and quiet, she rises and stretches. Finding a tree with low enough branches, she climbs as high as she is able. She surveys the landscape surrounding her. It is breathtaking. She is filled with wonder, joy, awe, and contentment. A hazy glow drifts lazily about high above the planet. A breeze blows softly across her skin. She takes it all in, letting it soothe her soul. When she feels her head nod, she decides it's time to climb down. Finding a space for herself amongst the animals, she settles in for the night. She's asleep quickly. Daybreak finds bird and lizard gone, perhaps off exploring, or perhaps foraging, or perhaps they will not be continuing her journey with her. She's not surprised Bear still sleeps. It's always sleeping. The planet could explode and Bear would sleep through it. Wolf and Cat lounge about, licking paws contentedly. They apparently already had their fill of fruit for breakfast. The woman grabs a couple of morsels for herself and joins them. She wonders if she should wake Bear. She doesn't cherish waiting for him to wake on his own, nor does she cherish leaving him behind while she heads out. Oh, sure, he would find her easily enough. However, she can't help but feel it rude to leave him behind to sleep. She places a dozen or so fruits on the warming rocks. Their glow is much diminished, but still strong enough to roast them. She hopes the scent will wake the slumbering creature. She slithers off among the shrubbery to do her morning wash and a quick garb change. By the time she re-enters the campsite, Bear is hovering over the warming rocks, greedily devouring the fruit. He looks up at her and offers up a sheepish, fruit-filled grin. He holds one up to her, an offering. Probably feels bad eating all her fruit. She declines. "I already ate my fill, sweet Bear. Those are for you," she soothes. "We're heading out as soon as I pack." At this, Cat rises and climbs to Bear's shoulder. It begins kneading, making his spot comfortable. Wolf lopes off down the trail, not waiting for her. She slings her bag over her shoulder and straps the walking stick. She goes to spread out and bury the warming stones for safety and realizes it's already been done. Must have been Lizard, she thinks. He must have been here but blended into the scenery. Hours later, she's just beginning to get hungry when they step out to the banks of Moat Lake. It's just as she remembered it, majestic mountains, springing up in the center of a sparkling clear water. Gentle waves splash softly against rocks. A sandy beach shines brightly in the glare of the sun. Random shells left by some sort of creature she's never seen sparkle. A splattering of diamonds, it seems to her. Bear waddles to the beach. His great paws kerplop clumsily and loudly as he slams each with fervor into the waters. Fluffball hisses and streaks off his back into a low branch of a nearby tree. Settling onto the branch, He licks his paws indignantly. Bear pays no mind to the offended cat, merely continues to lumber and plop and splash. Lizard joins him in the water, but at a distance, safe from the spray of a flying liquid. However, he isn't far enough to protect him from the great waves that the beast has created. The lizard gets washed away in a tumble of white-capped water. He emerges feet away. He cackles and clicks. Lizard's moods were always difficult for the woman to determine, but he seemed to have enjoyed his little ride. He runs up onto the beach, positions himself just so, and leaps back into the bear's waves. He clicks and clacks in unmistakable joy as he is pushed out onto the lake. Seeing the two are most likely going to make a day of their newfound game, she leaves them to it. Here she has built a small hut. She had stayed here for a while way back when, several times. It's a good site, a waypoint in most of our explores. The hut is in fairly good shape, considering she hasn't stopped here in a long while. Her explorations had been sending her in different directions. A layer of dust covers everything. A window had blown open. Much debris litters the place. Twigs and leaves, and there are a couple of places where nests have been built by some creatures or others and then abandoned. She spends some time cleaning the hut and rebuilding her warming rock pit. She sweeps the porch. Then she takes her shovel and digs up some warming rocks. She's just finishing setting up the fruit to roast when Bear and Lizard join her. Lizard promptly climbs a nearby tree. Bear circles in place several times before plopping down in a cool spot underneath the tree too. Both creatures are soon fast asleep. She takes the opportunity to go for a swim herself now that Bear isn't making waves. The water is comfortable and clear, despite Bear's upheaval. She walks out into the water until it is as high as her waist. Then she sinks down under the water. She swims, backstroke, front stroke, side stroke, floating some. Her mother had taught her how to swim aboard the ship. There had been an infinity pool aboard. She had loved it. She was good at it, too. She had never gotten to spend as much time there as she had liked. Her mother would not let her swim alone, so she could only go when her mom or dad was available to join her. They were busy humans. Both had important jobs aboard. Something called an engineer and flight control? Don't ask her what those were. She never quite knew. When she strolls out of the water, she finds fruits roasting in the warming pit. Bear is curled up in front of it with Furball and a bundle on its shoulder. Bird's nowhere to be seen again, but she hears it twilling somewhere off in the forest. Wolf lays comfortably next to the warming rocks, lazily munching. Gazing across the water to the mountains, she takes it all in. The view is breathtaking, even in the dimming light. The mist, which usually envelops their higher peaks, has been slowly creeping downwards. It swirls slowly now in large circular eddies at the height of a tall tree. In some places, it creeps down right to the water and out over it. Staring into it, along with the exertions of the day, has filled her with a pleasant fatigue. She lies down next to Bear, flat on her back. Blue moon, a large planet-sized moon, hangs quietly in the sky. Bands of varying shades of blue circle it horizontally. She falls into a peaceful slumber, watching lazy clouds of a greenish tinge float across its surface. The mists evaporate slowly with the rising sun. She's already up. A pile of branches rests off to the side of their camp, piled as high as her knees. She had woken before the sun and began scouring the forest for downed wood to use for her vessel. She exits the woods now, hauling a branch thicker than her arm and longer than she is tall. Behind her, Bear cracks and smashes through underbrush, carrying a larger limb. She drags her own up to the side of the previously gathered wood. Then she clears out quickly. Earlier on, she had nearly gotten smacked in the head with a log Bear had tossed into the pile. Bear's full of heart, but quite oafish and awkward. Bear had just finished adding his newest log to the pile when Wolf sauntered out of the trees. His tongue lolls from a tooth-filled grin. He trots up to her and holds his great head up to her hand. She scritches behind his ear. Squatting down next to him, eye to eye level, she rubs her hand through the thick fur between his shoulder blades. "Did you have a nice explore, Wolfie boy?" Just then, a resounding crack rings out through the forest. It echoes out across the water and the mountains. It's followed by many more snaps and cracks, every bit as loud. There's a great tearing sound, as if the earth is being wrenched free from the planet's surface. Tremors in the ground beneath her feet turns to quivering upheavals. It knocks her sideways and backwards. Suddenly Wolf is there behind her, steadying her with his body. She reaches around with her arm and buries her hand deep in his fur. She latches on with all her might. A great crinking and knocking of branches resonates through the forest. Several large thuds follow. She can feel each one in the dirt under her feet. The thuds continue, methodic and slow, moving closer. The creaking accompanies it still, along with the whispering sound of brush and branches against bush and branches. The sound of brush and branches against branch. The sound of brush and branches against brush and branches. Whatever it is, it's big, and it's coming her way. She's terrified. Never in her years alone on the planet has she been afraid. Well, not since she woke up here alone in the carnage of the fallen ship. But she looks around her, afraid for the well-being and safety of her animal friends. To her surprise, the animals are unconcerned, calm, sitting on their haunches in respect and reverence for whatever it is that comes through the forest, comes their way. Oh, sure, the ground shakes and jostles them about, but they seem unconcerned by that. Bird gets tossed up in the air repeatedly from the branch it sits on, until it hovers decidedly in the air. Fluffball has a death grip on Bear's shoulder with its claws, and an indignant stature, but its face, however, carries a serene and content expression of awe. Wolf presses against her, sensing her distress, she's sure. But he smiles, his wolfish smile, tongue, of course, hanging from his mouth. His tail continues to wag. The trees in front of her part, and she stares up into a serenely smiling tree. It's a gorgeous tree. Lush leaves, well-placed branches, beautiful coloring. It lifts a long, dirt-covered root daintily up and steps over shrubbery into the sand of the beach. Bird twitters out of the forest as the tree lifts more roots up and over, gently moving its massive form out into the open. The bird chirps and twitters and chitters, flapping about through its full branches until at last the feathered creature finds a branch it prefers. Grabbing on with all its talons, It sways back and forth as the branch moves. It chirps happily. It seems an eternity to the woman, but really it is only merely moments before the creature is entirely on the shore. It gently rustles itself from top to bottom, as if a great lady straightening her dress. The woman stands before it frozen, face drawn in awe, and mind completely blank. An awkward silence fills the space as they stare at each other. Bird sings a short song. The tree tilts its head as if listening thoughtfully. When the bird finishes, the tree bows slightly to the woman. Turning to the pile of wood, it glides gracefully over the sand, root over root, until it stands on the other side of the pile. Holding up its limbs as if to say stay, it makes a shooing motion to the woman. The woman doesn't respond. She stands unmoving, still gaping. The tree shoos more forcefully with its limb. This finally breaks the woman from her dumbfoundedness, and she steps dutifully back, and then steps back further. For now she is gripped by fear at a tree not only being animated, but ripping itself from the very ground and moving about. It shakes the bird loose, who flies over to land on the woman's shoulder. Bird twills happily. The great tree pauses, preparing perhaps. It begins to shake, slowly at first, then much more violently. Branches and twigs crack, fly, and fall. The woman, companion scurrying beside her, runs to hide behind the shelter of the hut. After several minutes, the ruckus subsides. She peeks her head from behind the shelter. The tree has stopped. It stands, daintily brushing its limbs back into place. Branches are thinned out now, more sparse. The beach is covered with greenery of all shapes and size. Bear guffaws heartily, finding the event humorous. Wolf prowls toward the creature, sniffs, steps back, and prowls closer again. Circles the great lady. For what else could one call her but the great lady? The woman tentatively steps out into the open. Taking in the disarray, she peers at the tree with uncertainty. Ahem! The great lady distinctly clears her wooden throat. The woman jumps. Bird tells me, she explains, that you require a vessel to cross the water and require wood to do so. Will this be enough? The lady examines all her limbs strewn across the sand. I must say, I was overdue for a pruning, wasn't I? She primps her leaves with a branch. Not hearing a response, she gazes at the woman questioningly. Yes, the woman stutters. I believe so. Oh, good. Is there anything else I can help with? No, I can take it from here. Splendid. The great tree deftly steps through the rubble off to the side. She positions herself near the water and becomes quite still. She gazes serenely off to the distant mountains, saying no more and remaining motionless, as if a tree once more, but you can still see her face. A slight breeze ruffles through her leaves. Soft waves gently wash on the sand. The woman sets about collecting branches and sorting them according to size. It takes her most of the day. By late afternoon, despite Bear's constant barrage of yanking limbs into the wrong place and undoing all her work, she has branches enough situated to tie into a sturdy raft. Tomorrow we shall tie them together and be off by late morning, she speaks out loud. Lovely, the tree responds. The woman jumps. She had forgotten the great lady as she worked. The tree had not budged or made a sound beyond the light clacking of limbs in the wind. No more noise than any other tree that surrounds them. The woman blushes. Turning to the warming pit, she sees Lizard has once again filled the ring with warming stones and gathered a pile of fruit which rests nearby on a flat stone. It has always amazed her that, no matter which combination of creatures accompanies her on her explores, someone always takes up a job duty. No fuss, no muss. They just see something needs doing, and they do it. No arguments, no pointing fingers, no resentments that she could see. She remembers as a child on the ship that the humans didn't work that way. Countless arguments she overheard of people quarreling over who was going to do what and when and how, and on they went. As she ponders the bickering humans, bird swoops out of the trees. In its beak dangles strands of long, thick vines. It saw the job needed doing without being told as much. She's ever so grateful. She really wasn't looking forward to foraging for vines after dinner. Now she can enjoy a leisurely evening of companionship with her friends, perhaps getting to know the great lady, whom she hopes will be called friend as well. She sees that the great lady has followed her to the pit and perched in a semi-seated position next to Lizard. She bends a branch down to the reptile. It climbs up onto it. The lady smiles contentedly. The woman grabs 2 fruits, holding one out to the tree. Do you eat fruit? Oh my, no. But thank you for your thoughtfulness. I absorb my nutrients from the ground, you see. This being said, she gathers several roots and burrows them into the earth in front of her. A strange expression graces her face. She runs her roots in and out of the sand, back and forth, as if a human running their toes through the sand. She smiles, burying her roots snugly. I must say, no creature told me what that would be like. It's positively delightful. She giggles, limbs and leaves shaking. A few leaves come loose and drift slowly to the ground. The woman laughs with her. Soon an awkward silence settles in. Neither quite know what to say. So, the woman says awkwardly, you're a tree? Oh, yes, a tree, quite so, for as long as I can remember. I didn't know the trees were, sentient. No? How odd. I've personally communicated with several who consider you a personal friend. Were they mistaken? Oh, dear. Oh, no, they're not mistaken. You're not mistaken. I consider them friends. It's just I wasn't aware that, well, you move and all. Can they all move? Why are you the only one I've seen? Ah, I see the dilemma. We are all capable of it, but it takes quite a lot out of us. We just don't. Except once not quite sure what the human word is. A certain amount of time passes, and one of us must make the great journey. I was chosen after the last journey to make this one when it was time. It's early, though. She gazes thoughtfully across the water for some moments. Early, the woman inquires. Oh, yes, by several years. We hope it doesn't mind, for when I heard bird chattering on and on about your mountain explorer, I thought, well, now is the time. I shall join them. I conferred with past emissaries, and they all agreed that it should be fine. So I absorbed up some extra energy, pulled up my roots, and, well, here I am. She smiles graciously, as if she has just told the most wonderful tale ever told. Isn't that splendid? She asks, leaning in conspiratorially in the woman's direction. Yes. Yes, it is. The woman allows silence to envelop them. A breeze rustles like a wave through the leaves of the forest. Water splashes ever so gently again on the shore. Morning finds the woman mentally unprepared to take the next step in her journey. She had awakened to find her crew gone. She's uncertain whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. She had planned on having several days on shore, gathering wood and building her raft. The great lady's assistants cut all that work into one day. It was a nice thing. However, there was always something therapeutic and meditative in gathering the materials and taking time to craft something. It was part of what she loved about her explorers. Probably, if she's honest with herself, also something that she needs. Wolf's nose nudges her shoulder. She had not heard the stealthy creature return from the forest. It sets on its haunches, body against her side. Its warmth and fur and contact is comforting. It settles her nerves. She's reminded of a Labrador that lived aboard the ship. She never quite knew who owned that dog, for it seemed as if every crew member owned it. Thinking back, she wonders if it weren't the other way around. The lab owned every crew member. Sandra? No, Sally. It was a girl dog named Sally. Perhaps Sally actually was part of the crew, and the woman had just not known it, being a child and all. It did seem like the dog had a job to do, and it took that job seriously. Wolf pants next to her. She smiles, reaching high up to scritch behind its ear. She smiles, scritching it again behind its ear. Plop, plop, plop. Lizard is standing on its back legs next to a pile of cooled down warming stones. It grabs one in its tiny lizard hand, winds back, and throws as mightily as it can muster. Kerplop, plop, plop, plop. He lets another loose, apparently determined to see just how far he can throw. Some of them skip across the lake. She sits on a log and watches the rings of waves that spread from each rock. She hears the tree moving about in the woods and wonders how long she'd been staring at the water. By the sun's placement in the sky, it looks to be midday already. When the tree enters the clearing, she is somehow even more beautiful than before. The woman wonders how on dirt that is possible. But it's true. The great tree is positively glowing. I'm so sorry, my dear. Bird promised to let me know when you were ready to depart, so that I could commune with the forest prior to embarking on our journey. However, I got lost in the fellowship, and Bird never made a chirp. Are you ready to cross the waters? Not quite, actually. I found I needed a bit of reflection time myself to prepare. Perhaps we could spend the afternoon in meditation and leave come morning? Yes, the great lady grins. That sounds simply marvelous. The two companions spend a noisy meal together, for animals are coming and going. Most bring with them some sort of token and leave it at the lady's feet, roots, as if paying homage of a sort. The lady simply scoops them up and places them within the hollows of her branches. Why do they pay you tribute? The woman whispers to the tree. Oh, it is not tribute. They wish me to take it to the mountains for them. Oh, that's a thing? Should I be taking something to the mountains as well? You take what is in your heart. You bring all that is yourself and all that is your people. But have your past emissaries never explained all this, my dear? I am the only of my kind. There has been no others on the planet. We were passing by in a great ship, and something went wrong. The ship crashed on the planet, and it is only me who survived. Oh, dear. I see now. You must meditate then. Contemplate all that you are, the good and the bad. Consider all your people were, the good and the bad. Like I said, let the knowledge become you, and you become the knowledge. Then take it all with you to the mountain. We will journey to the heart. There you will sing to the heart the song of your peoples and enter the waters. The woman remains silent, bewildered, trying to process the words of the tree. Do you have questions, dear? No, I guess not. It all sounds rather serious. I only meant to go on and explore to satisfy my curiosity. I had no idea, about any of this. My peoples have no song, really. I see. Well, might I suggest that your curiosity is part of your song? The animals adore you. This is also part of your song. It needn't be any more complicated than that. I tell you what, my dear, let's take a bit more time. Spend time in reflection, and I will leave you in peace to your thoughts. 2 mornings from now, let us meet before daylight at the raft, and we will cross the waters. In the meantime, should you need me, send Bird. Do not overworry or stress yourself. It should be a joyous remembrance of who you are and where you come from. No more, no less. woman simply nods. The great lady rubs her arm with a leaf-laden branch and departs. The woman remains motionless for some time, staring out at the gentle waves of the great moat.